All right, we are recording,
All right.
and it is the second. So it's April 2nd, 2020. I'm on with Chris, and we're just gonna kind of go over your experience and talk whatever you want to talk about.
Sure. Sure.
So, kind of like, what happened? How did it unfold for you?
So actually today would be 21 days. Yeah. So 3 weeks ago tonight, actually. So on March 12th, came down with flu-like symptoms. Obviously 2 days earlier, there was the first two reported cases of COVID-19 in the state, right? That's when they made the announcement. Knew it was here in the state. Obviously, a lot of conversation, basketball regionals, things going on with the family. That week, my son was playing basketball, went to two basketball games, had a small concert venue event downtown with my youngest son, went down there and saw his former teacher. So, I was around a lot of people that week. I had traveled from South Carolina through DTW on the 28th, so that was about 13 days later. But essentially, two reported cases in Michigan. So it was one of those things where I think a lot of people, as this was being communicated and things were starting to, unfold with, obviously the travel bans from Europe and some things that were transpiring in the back and forth. Most people thought something was coming. They realized it was probably a lot like the flu. I think that was the assumption. As was even our mindset. So, when I came down with flu-like symptoms that night, it was essentially like, there's no way I could have this thing, right? Because there's really not that many people in the state, reportedly, right? So, um, aches, chills, pains that evening, hot bath, Advil PMs, put myself to bed early, figured I'm getting the flu, woke up, told my work, hey, I'm not coming in. Didn't feel good last night, gonna see what this thing transpires. Didn't really have a fever. um, and then, was on a conference call in the morning, not feeling the greatest. And then, my fever spiked, probably late morning, early afternoon, probably 101 plus 101.5, 102-ish. And, knew now, okay, you got the flu. And I figured we'll ride this thing out and just like you normally do. So, not thinking a lot of it, just trying to handle, your health as best you can when you have something like that. There's not a lot you can do. Doctors don't really want to see people right now that are sick for obvious reasons. The case started to proliferate. The school cancellation was that late that evening on Thursday. Woke up to that on Friday.
Yeah.
Managed through the weekend with the fever, and just tried to understand what was going on, and it was kind of riding out like a standard flu. Monday woke up, or Sunday night, no fever. Monday, I woke up again, no fever, thinking, okay, this is good. Broke the fever, ride this out, get 48 hours with no fever, figure out how to return to work. Let my work know, hey, I'm not going to be in. So, just it was a normal situation. Now, Monday night, my wife got ill, same symptoms, achy back, chills, that kind of thing, same flu-like symptoms. I woke up Tuesday morning, had a little bit of nausea, which I hadn't had before. So not feeling the greatest, told him, hey, I'm just going to ride it out today, see how this feels, trying to get the 48 hours, fever free. And, later that day, my, probably 3-4 o'clock, my fever came back. So, never experienced that before with the flu, right? Once you break a fever and your body kind of gets over it, you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of cause for concern. And, so made a call to a teledoc, tried calling my GP's office. They didn't answer, so I left a message. Gave the teledoc my symptoms. He said, it sounds like the flu, but you should here's some numbers. You should probably call the CDC. Well, of course you can't get through.
Yeah.
So, we go through it, and I called my boss and said, hey, I think we're going to go try and get tested. This was a recommendation, and because doctors' offices don't want to see people with fevers. they're going to refer them to try and, figure out what's going on. All this is new. These drive-through testing facilities are popping up, so we're going through it. So we woke up Wednesday. She slept in a little bit. About 9:30, we hopped in the car. We went over to McLaren Macomb, pulled up. There was probably about 36 cars ahead of us. So, a decent line. My calculations was it was probably going to be anywhere from, 3 to 5 hours, depending on how we can process these people. And the line was moving pretty good. We got up to the 10. It was about an hour and 45 minutes or so. And, the PA comes up to the car. They start the screening process. Hey, what's your symptoms? We go through the flu, fever, da, da, da. And the one thing that they asked was, do you have shortness of breath? And we said, no, we don't have shortness of breath, but we have cough, we have fever, we've got aches, chills, pains, all flu-like type symptoms that are similar to touching my face. Although I've been in quarantine and I'm sick already, so it doesn't matter. But so we go through that and we said, listen, the one reason a lot of people were coming up and driving off is either they didn't meet the screening criteria or they didn't want to pay for the ER visit to do the flu screening, which, you have these workers out there, and even though the COVID test may be covered, other types of screenings and resources won't be. So, yeah, that's a whole healthcare discussion, but so I think a lot of people were driving off. So, that says a little bit about the number that are being reported are probably a lot lower than what people actually have, right? And initially he also said, listen, it was running 3 to 5 days to get a test screen and get results back. We're hearing it could be as much as 10 days now. You've already been sick for 5 days. My wife had just gotten sick. He's like, by the time you're going to get the results, you're probably going to have to quarantine for 14 days anyway from onset of symptoms. So, it's probably, and we said, listen, we just want to know, do we have the flu, right?
Yeah.
Like, we want to put a name with whatever it is we're experiencing. We'll be happy to take a flu screen. So we pull in, do the paperwork. My wife, so they're only testing one per car, obviously, because if one has it, everybody in the household is going to have the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So she got tested because she was the most recently sick and had the higher fever in the morning. So they swabbed her, said, we'll call you in 3 hours if you have a positive flu test. If not, we'll send your sample on to the CDC.
So the
again,
flu test is only like 3 hours.
Right. So
okay.
Standard, like if you were to go to your doctor's office and
that's right.
They could do that, right? So we said, hey, that's great. So we go back home. It's about noon-ish when we leave the hospital. We get home a little after. 3 o'clock rolls around, no call. 3:30, 4:30, no call. So she says, I'm going to call the hospital and figure out what's going on. So got a hold of the ER, said, hey, your test was negative for the flu. We're sending it off. So now we're like,
okay,
what do we do, right? So we just said, well, we're gonna have to write it out. So I still had a fever. That was Wednesday when we were tested. I think the 18th. So called my work, let them know, hey, here's the recommendation. We won't know. We're gonna see how symptoms go. And I essentially had, a fever for that Tuesday through Friday again. Was fever-free Saturday, Sunday. Read that article that I mentioned in my post about family whose son came back from Spain. He contracted it. The family had it. He got tested at Beaumont, got a positive test result. He was one of the earlier, test people. And so I read that article and it was like every symptom they had, we had, right? It was essentially everything we were doing was exactly what they were going through, and they didn't have shortness of breath either. So, the cough, everything else was exactly the same. Went 2 days fever free that Saturday, Sunday, the second weekend. Monday rolled around, my fever came back again. Right.
Jeez,
so
this is the third time. Well, it came back the second time.
Yeah. So this is essentially 8 out of 11 days, I've had a fever. Right. So, manage that, again, staying in contact with, work. waiting for test results still. And then Wednesday, during the day, we realized, one of the symptoms that was being communicated was loss of sense of smell, right? Because, I was getting this extreme sinus pressure, behind right here in your sinus cavity, basically behind your cheekbones, where it
Yeah.
just felt like this massive pressure. I could breathe through. I had no real congestion, so I could breathe through both nostrils the whole time. It just felt like a sinus infection with no congestion. Um, and because it sits in there, one of the things that it can affect is your sense of smell. So totally lost sense of smell.
Wow.
In fact, my wife's getting hers back. I still have very limited, if any, smell. Minor sense of taste at the moment. I can more taste textures, and I don't know. Sometimes my mind's just playing on me.
Yeah.
Um, but so fast forward, we got our results back this Monday. Obviously, that it was positive. We had been on the mend, which was a great thing. Um, worked through all the psychology of it. The big thing with the psychology is, you have standard experiences, through your fitness and your health. And so, you're pretty in tune with what you've experienced and what your body's experienced as you go through certain things in life, right? And so when you come into something that's completely foreign to you and you have no sense of reference, and then on top of it, you have um, all of the hype and media and proliferation of this doom and gloom, like everybody's going to die, and
Yeah.
you're seeing this. So it really turns into a mental capacity, and how you can manage that. At least it did for me. It was pretty demoralizing that you're doing everything to try and get well, that you've done, and you can't seem to get through it, right?
Yeah.
um,
Nothing worked.
right.
Like, I've never had a fever that went away for more than a day and came back, let alone twice.
Right, right. So your frame of reference is completely out of the window with this thing. You have very limited resources as to what you can do. You're awaiting test results. Your GP and standard doctors don't want to touch you. You're not ill enough that would require hospitalization. You don't want to, take up any unnecessary resources. So you're really just trying to fight this thing on your own. And there's some things that we read and learned, and other things that are coming out, with some informative posts from doctors that would probably help people as people do start falling ill with this in the future. But we go through all that, and the reason I posted that experience pre-test results is I thought about putting something out when we had gone through the test, what the testing experience was like at the hospital, but I didn't want to be alarmist either, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to. The biggest thing, the hardest thing for me was that positivity, right? Because you have so many things working against that mental capacity for positivity, right? Your health is
Yeah.
a thing. So when you're not feeling good, one of the things that can really drive you down is, all of the inputs that are just, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. So
And
part,
you're obviously like, yeah, I know. I've been dealing with this
right.
for 2 weeks. I know it's bad.
I'm dealing with it. I don't know what it is. I'm pretty sure it's this. Um, and it was just the turning point of, okay, let's try and get through it. The tiredness, and try to maintain somewhat of a normal life. Like you mentioned, I do have two boys. My youngest initially came down a couple days after my wife got sick with a small fever, for about a day and a half. Was tired, but was still able to kind of muster through his coursework. Our kids are still doing online coursework. They attend a private school, so luckily for them, it will count. Any educational will count for them, which is great. School's done a great job, I feel, for a lot of the teachers of the public school systems that have really put forth a lot of effort. I think the districts and the state should work out something for obviously a lot of these students, and that's in the works. But so he was managing through that, and really doing pretty well. It was about his only symptoms. He lost his sense of smell like we did, so it's kind of irritating to him, right? And so then my oldest son had a little bit of sinus headache and pressure and developed a cough but no fever. So they've kind of experienced some of the similar symptoms that we have. But it goes to show that somebody could develop a low-grade fever, may not even catch it or detect it, right? Especially if they don't have a thermometer, but may have some of these symptoms that are asymptomatic, as they say, right? So,
Yeah.
they talk about these people that could be carriers and asymptomatic and not develop symptoms that would warrant the fact to even really see a doctor, right? So that's a very real possibility. And, so for us in the post, like I said, there's so much negativity out there and so many things that you can hang your hat on that are bad. And trust me, I don't want to put light. This is something that I wouldn't want people to have to deal with. I mean, I'm 21 days in and I still do have a cough a little bit, mostly after I eat or, bedtime, when you're in the prone position.
Oh,
It's not as difficult as it was initially. So it's definitely getting better. Um, my work is requested, hey, just stay off till you're symptom free, even though I've met the CDC guidelines. That's a whole nother thing. But
yep.
so my approach was, you don't hear about people who, make it through this thing, or you don't hear enough about people who are making it through this thing, right?
Yes.
The focus is currently on detection and management of, people who need medical attention. And that's a lot of what you're seeing. So my thing is listen, I got it. It's beatable. Realize that I got it at a time when a lot of people didn't think that it was really out there. So it's
Yeah.
probably one, going undetected or extremely more contagious than what people think it is, even though a lot of the medical community has said, it's anywhere from 3 to 6 times as more contagious than the standard flu, right? So definitely, have to, follow guidelines about staying safe, but know that there are people that have managed through this situation and are going to come out on the other side, right? So, just be thankful that if you have your health still and you haven't had to manage it, that you're there. Know that there are people that can support you, me being one, or other people, right? Doctors in the medical community. And like you said, just have faith that there are people there that are praying for you and praying for others, and that it can definitely make a difference in your health. And turn off some of the negativity. I mean, take in information, but be informed about it, right? And um, don't let that fear turn into a mental disease, right? It's a physical disease and a virus, but don't let it affect your mental capacity to be able to deal with what's in front of you. So
And I think that's one of the things I took out of your post was because physically you're like, I took a warm bath and I took Advil PM. And I remember going, yeah. And I try to go to bed early. And then if the coughing starts, you're like, well, good luck on that because that's gone too.
right,
And then at least usually you have comfort food. And then you're like, no, sense of smell and taste is gone because that's exciting.
yeah,
So you're like, come on, what else do we have? Because this is pretty much horrible. Let's just get it all in there.
right,
No, but and it is, and I think for me, I gravitated to that about the mental portion because that's where the optimism lies. That's where the light is at the end of the tunnel.
right,
Because it is such a new. They don't, people don't know that it's kind of like, well, yes, it is devastating, and I, like you said, we're not trying to make light of it. We're not trying to minimize it at all.
right.
Obviously, because it's real, because your entire family went through something.
Of course, right.
It's just that, okay, that stuff we can't control, and what can we do? What can we control? Okay, we can control what we focus on.
Right.
I had fallen into that category about being a newsmonger and just picking up everything. Now, at least I'm intelligent enough to, watch both sides and pretty much all the channels and then kind of say, okay, well, what was in the middle? I'll take that. And then, but then
Right.
it realized something my wife said, just kind of an offhand comment about well, yeah, Jeff's on the news all the time, and I thought, oh, that's not good because yes, they still have to make ratings because that's old thinking. There's this is how we have to report something. This is how we kind of have. It's just like politics right now. I'm almost really excited. It hasn't fully come to fruition, but I'm excited that more people on left and right can be like, let's be just a little bit more center. Let's just, let's just kind of. It's what I fundamentally think maybe a bigger government. You fundamentally think maybe a little bit, but right now we can see the need for both things. So let's and because that's what it is. But and so
Well, I
that's kind
think
of what. Oh, go
I,
ahead.
I think it to that regard, you really have to look at um, how are we focused on fighting the matter at hand, because I've always said, and my wife ran for office, but one of the things that I've always said is, if the government truly went out and tried to solve problems, that we wouldn't need politicians anymore, or I should say, we would need them at a much uh, lesser extent, right?
Yes.
So focus on people who are really focused on putting some solutions in place to fix, what's currently at hand, and what do we do coming out of this that will help us manage this in the future. I think I part of what I said is I think everybody got it wrong, right?
Yeah.
But you can only get it right if you're also getting the correct information. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't think a lot of the information came out of China that was accurate. um,
Yes. Exactly.
it's not to say I'm placing blame, but what I'm saying is a lot of experts that have dealt with this, Dr. Birx, who's on the federal panel as well, very intelligent, her and Dr. Fauci, right? Definitely two voices of reason. But she said, she looked at this pandemic, it was one of these things where as the data was coming out, it was something of a virus of a lesser extent that we've dealt with before, that is more on the level of a flu or
Yeah.
a previous epidemic that hasn't proliferated itself or been as contagious. So a lot of determinations and recommendations are built off those early data sets.
Yeah.
When the data set changed drastically with a company, a country like Italy and then Spain, it was like, okay, we really need to shift focus. And so I know people are going to stand up on their soapbox and say we should have done this and should have done that, but what I would say is one, um, be as critical as you're willing to be as critical of yourself, number one.
100%.
And number two, um, you know, really try and understand what people are trying to get out of standing on the soapbox and making these statements. And is it really helpful placing blame versus, okay, we got it wrong. What can we do now, and what can we do looking forward?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't help anybody who's either going through it, afraid they're going to have to go through it, or trying to figure out what the solutions are and how, like you said, they can manage things moving forward. So, what I wanted to do with my post, which hopefully came through, is, one, know what some of the potential symptoms and signs are, right? So
Yep.
that if you do come down with something that's similar, um, know what you have to do to manage and document it, so that you can go into it with a mindset of, okay, I've seen this, I understand this is what it is. What are my options, right? Um, and then understand that there are people that can help you through that, and what are your options to be able to manage it, so that you don't let it get so much in your head that it can also drive down your physical capacity to be able to deal with this, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
And I know one of the things about your post, like you said, is you had not really been working out for almost 2 weeks, like 10 days or something like that prior to. And, being somebody who does CrossFit, that's a long time. And then all of a sudden you start not feeling well. You're like, oh, okay. Now mentally, it's just like you had a lot of excuses or a lot, some people will say reasons. Um, being a person who works on mental capacity, you understand it's their excuses of, you know, well, I just don't feel really up to working out or this and that and the other thing. But knowing, separating and saying, listen, like I wrote down specifically because what I really liked is when you know, I said, what was the turning point? You said you realized it's a mental thing. Okay. Because even if the doctor says we do or we don't, we have these symptoms that's some, like you said, something I've never experienced. And okay, now what? You know, and that's one of my favorite things is that's what I took from when I met you in the beginning was, okay, you know, this situation happened with a family member. Now what? And, you know, we do the best with what we can. We do the best we can with what we have when we get it.
Right.
And so hopefully, like you said, who cares? You know what? We didn't have a stockpile of stuff enough. Well, that's because we didn't think, nobody thought 1918 was going to repeat itself.
Right.
So who cares? It's like, okay, we're here now. And so that doesn't mean, you know, everybody needs to stockpile 3 months worth of food and this and that and the other thing, but we should be washing our hands.
Right.
You know, I mean, we sit there and tell kids, hey, don't keep things in your mouth and up your nose and in your face, and maybe occasionally wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, or I don't know, if you're talking to somebody, don't
Right.
just, you know, and cover. But there are so many more things that we can do, and I think that's what I got really excited about, like you said, is yes, there's people are divided, and you know, look at, if they're on a soapbox, are they on a soapbox where they're saying, hey, you know what, we need to help as many people as we can, all ideas welcome. That's a great soapbox. If
Yeah.
it's a blame soapbox, it's hopefully turns to white noise.
Yeah, and what I see that turn into is just people trying to make themselves feel better, right?
Yes.
And I just don't see it as being helpful in this time, right? So, yeah, there's going to be plenty of time for that. Trust me, we have an election coming up. You want to fill
At some
yourself,
point, yep.
yeah, you want to fill yourself with all that, great. But now's just not the time. Let's focus on what it is that you can do to one, understand what could potentially come at you. What are some of the things that are coming at that can help you get through this? What's the support network that you need or can manage, and how can you help? Even if it's just staying at home, that is helpful, right? So there are things, yeah. So there are things that you can do, and just manage to the things that you can do to be helpful to your internal mental capacity and what you can do to be helpful to other people, right? So um yeah, I mean, that's essentially why I did it, and we're going to have hard times. Yesterday, or I'm sorry, Tuesday, we found out that somebody that we knew who was only 24 passed away with complications, right? um it it's gonna affect people that we know. It's gonna affect our lives. um you have to take that in stride, as sad as that is. um it's tragic, really, but um this is what we have to deal with as humans, right? No one is guaranteed, to live forever on this earth, right? So we know not the hour nor the day, but we have to be able to move forward. And people who have a higher mental capacity to be able to handle tragedy usually have, a more positive lifestyle. I think we can all attest, at one form or another, that mentally we can let things get to us to where um, it will it can drive us down, right? I mean, we can play scenarios in our head that are not helpful. So how do we push those out and just focus on the things that are positive? So
Like I said, I really appreciate just doing this because that's been my whole goal is, and I understand, you know, I was listening to Simon Sinek today about, you know, difference between positivity and optimism. And you know, it's tomato, potato, it's like whatever, it's the same. But that's, to me, that's a huge, it's where your starting point is mentally, because, you know, you can let it crush you and decide, because you could have gotten even more sick and then responded even more negatively. And then your kids now may feel, instead of like, oh, wow. Because I'm sure at some point you gave words of encouragement like, wow, I'm glad you guys feel better so quickly. Like, that's awesome. And, just dadding, just normal parenting.
Right.
But that I think permeates through everything. It really does, because then it came through your posts. And like you said with your friend who passed, that is the reality. And it's sobering, and I think the reason why I paid attention is because my dad and my dad and his friend, and they were on a cruise in the end of January, and they were sick for 20 days and had medicines that didn't do anything. And they came into Washington. That's where they left from and where they came into. And the doctor, like 2 rounds of antibiotics did nothing and everything. And they had the same symptoms.
Yeah.
But that would have been, middle January to middle February.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like, okay, we're not, you can sit and mope and, woe is me and the world is ending, or you can, you see these people who are dealing with it in such a positive way, like you, like, as opposed to, I loved exactly how you put it with people on the soapbox. Blaming is such a self-centered perspective that's almost easier to see nowadays, because almost most of the stuff on social media especially is inclusive and just optimistic and supporting people. And, and so it's so contrary to what we as humans are wanting to focus on when people stand up and start blaming somebody, that I like that.
Right.
This is a great opportunity, but it's mentally, it's like you said, the ones with the mental capacity. You might not like your lot. This is our lot in life as humans. Nobody's getting out alive. And so there's so many things in addition to the coronavirus. The regular flu didn't stop killing people. Heart attacks didn't stop killing people. This is in addition to. That's why it's so scary, because it's like, it just doesn't say, okay, well, I'll do this year. You come back next year, but your positivity affected me in a great, great way. And like I said, before I started recording, I told anybody who would listen to me about how awesome it was. And, yes, it sucked that your whole family was dealing with it, but how amazing you were doing it, dealing with it, And so it's wonderful, because even if one person hears this and they're like, okay, yeah, I that's what I can do mentally. I can, be more positive.
Sure.
They're going to tell somebody, and then that person's going to. And so what's cool is you don't realize maybe how many lives you've touched just by that post, even if they didn't necessarily do what I'm doing and say, I want to personally thank you, in the new norm of personal.
Right.
But that's what I wanted to do, and
I mean, the feedback was, I mean, obviously, as you saw with most of the comments, was, it was extremely positive. I had a bunch of people reach out to me just like, hey, I went through this and this is what I had, and da 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 da. And some of it was confirming of the fact, like you said, with your father or whatever on the cruise. People have shown very similar symptoms that were undeniable as to what it probably was, even though it's not confirmed. Now, antibody tests in the future could determine, do people have it, right? So
yeah,
that's part of the forensic part of it that can happen later on. But was it here? Probably. But and people who said, like, I've never seen this perspective based on what's been reported over the last 2 to 3 weeks, right? Nobody's laid it out like you did, and nobody's explained, like, this is what everything I had to go through, and this is they took that to heart as saying, thank you for actually kind of telling the truth as to what somebody has to deal with. and it's empowering, right? Because
Yeah.
if you have knowledge that's true, right, that people can lean on, now they have a subset of things that they can refer back to and know. So, knowing some of those signs is very helpful, versus just, certain things that are being communicated, or this is what you have to worry about being a problem. Well, if you're sick and you're not feeling good and nobody can determine what it is, that doesn't make you feel good, right?
No.
That's not going to make you feel any better about what it is you're going through or what you're dealing with. So, yeah, the feedback was fantastic. It was kind of a subset, and by me, you're in isolation. We're all in isolation. You can't see anybody. Like you said, the normal form of communication is you and I sitting here on a conference call. But um, one of the things when you are sick and you don't feel good and you can't communicate effectively, and you have all this stuff and you can't put that information out there, just by writing that down on Wednesday and publishing that, and having people read it and take it to heart, and getting that uh, off my chest as to what we've gone through, it was almost like it took a burden and it just moved it off of me and just over here, right? And with that communication with people and people reaching out, it was almost like people were grabbing a hammer and smashing that weight that was on your shoulders, right? And
Yeah.
so, um, even if you're not sick, people are going to have issues with, isolation and what they feel and all this stuff. And, people need to reach out and, pull that off of people, and know that, even though we can't sit next to one another across a table, you can still communicate effectively with people. So,
One of the things I love, and that's exactly what I felt by just reaching out to people. The outcome isn't up to me. The effort is.
right.
And that's the mental capacity is, having done CrossFit competitions. Now, I've understood, and like I said, I've seen myself work out, so I'm pretty confident. I know where I'm going to be at the end of a competition. But having taken people to CrossFit Games and really high level, you cannot guarantee victory in anything. Now,
Right.
you can mitigate, you can, prepare, but once again, that's your effort. The outcome is not determined 100% by your effort. There's also circumstances. You have healthy people who are getting this disease. You have unhealthy people who have underlying issues over 65 who are fine. But like you said, it's what can I do? Well, you know what? I can get rid of this. And I feel it's weird because I almost took being around people for granted. I mean, once again, I think this gives us great perspective because we have a lot of time to, hopefully become mentally tougher and have change our perspective in that, like, why did I not just text you and say, hey, I was thinking of you? I mean, I would when you did the 1,000,000-meter rows and stuff like that or whatever, but why did I not just say, when I saw your shirt hanging up, say, hey, you know what? I just appreciate that you gave me that opportunity to be around you guys. You're good people. And so now that's what I can do. That's my effort. My effort is to, because I haven't gone through that. I haven't, like I said, it's 4,000 miles away in England. I'm with my father-in-law. I can share you with people. I can share that hope and that, like you said, positivity and optimism and realism. I think that's what was good is you weren't overly anything. You were just like, so here's the facts.
Right.
It was like a deposition. You're like, here's the facts, and now here's what I'm doing about it.
Right.
And I think it's hard because fear intertwines everything. It's such an emotional response that it just goes, it feeds on itself. And so grounding yourself and saying, okay, supports, like I kept writing the things that were important, like popped out was support system. How can I be helpful?
Right.
Not just how can it help me, but how can I be helpful to my community? To, like you see even young people sitting there. My son earlier said I was doing an interview and he goes, well, please be careful. And I said, oh, it's on the internet. He goes, okay, because but that's social responsibility, which, I don't want to get into what the country has gotten into an extent, but I think it's great that as a human race, we're now changed our paradigm thinking of, oh, well, what I do will affect, the butterfly effect. It will affect somebody in Wuhan, China. And
Right.
what I do today is going to affect my tomorrows. And so I, like I said, I can't begin to thank you enough for just being open and willing, and honest to tell your story, because it gave me a lot more comfort, I think, maybe than it gave you, because it was like, okay, so here's what I can look for. Here's what I can do. Here's, and that's one of the things when my wife, when I wanted to go to the doctors, she's like, you're not that bad.
Yeah.
If you get worse, sure. Otherwise,
Right.
you're not that bad. So I'm going to stop the recording 1 second. Maybe.